vending machine sold these in like a massive pack. And I never understood why my classmates were so obsessed with them. Now I do. I could literally eat like 4 of these, 5 of these. I could eat the entire box of these, honestly. These little Welch's fruit snacks, they're so good. I used to love fruit snacks when I was a kid, so maybe it's not the fact that it's Welch's, it's just a fruit snack. But welcome back. Today we are talking about Evermore by Sara Holland. It is a miracle that we are getting Evermore, this Evermore review, because I completely forgot about it. Yeah, and the irony is I was ready to review this book before I actually reviewed Everless, but by the time I reviewed Everless, I was too tired to review this one, so I said, let's put it off. And I just kept thinking, wow, I got something to do, and I couldn't remember what it was. It was review Evermore, but I've been reading a lot lately, and I've had 2 or 3 books to review at a time, and it's just exhausting, so things are slipping through the cracks. I'm slipping through the cracks. Honestly, sometimes I feel like I really just need to go get my head checked. Unfortunately, this one for me did not pass muster, and it didn't seem to pass muster for a lot of others either. Whatever it was that made Everless so engaging and enthralling was missing here. I didn't understand what people meant when they were talking about the whole blood irons aspect being missing from this, and that is what made the first one so strong. But I kind of get it. I felt like this one lacked direction of a sort. In Everless, we meet this girl named Jules, and her realm is governed by the use of blood irons, which is essentially you give your blood, it is turned into money. That money can be consumed in order to prolong a person's life. The whole deal with how blood irons came to be comes down to the Alchemist and the Sorceress. Turns out she's the Alchemist. And this other character who no one suspected is the Sorceress. At the end of the book, Jules is framed for murder. So now we're picking up in Evermore where Jules just wants, not necessarily even to clear her name, but she just wants everything to be sorted out and fixed. When I was reading people's reviews about this, because we get a lot of backstory concerning Jules's past, because she doesn't remember any of her past lives because she has 12 of them. She does not remember being the Alchemist. I'm thinking they just don't like that we're getting all of this backstory because it's dragging things down. But I thought that her backstory moments were disjointed and they didn't provide a whole lot of information. Because she has no memory, the foggy, discombobulated memories that she does obtain don't make a whole lot of sense. It just didn't help because I don't know what she's actually supposed to be learning. She doesn't know what she's supposed to be learning. And in the end, I don't feel like they fit well together to create a whole picture. And then without this idea of blood irons, then what's the point? The crux of the matter is, how do I stop Caro? But getting there, what was the point? I don't know. Like, I really don't know what the vehicle was supposed to be, because it felt like she was just going from place to place to place. Again, my initial thought was, because she's on her 12th life, we will go through all 12 of her lives, and each one will provide her a clue, and they will direct her in the way she needs to go. Maybe in just like the Deathly Hallows for Harry Potter, he has to figure out what the Horcruxes are in order to defeat Voldemort. Jules has to figure out what it is that really came between them, what it is that got her and Caro into the positions they are. I think we had 3 or 4 flashbacks, and that was it. I feel like she was seeking out information, but didn't really actually get any information. The information she got, nobody understood. But let's dive into it. Jules is on the run. She has decided to go back to her hometown of Crofton because she wants to convince her best friend, Amma, of her innocence. This was my first problem because Amma had very little to do in the first novel, and so I was thinking she's going to be a much bigger character in this novel, and she dies right away. So I wanted more of Amma. I didn't understand, why are we going and putting Amma in danger? You're supposed to be on the run. What does it matter if Amma believes you or not? I mean, I get why it matters. This is her best friend. She doesn't want her best friend to think ill of her. But I was hugely disappointed when Amma dies, because Jules, she convinces Amma that she's innocent. She doesn't sleep at Amma's house. I think she's sleeping in the chicken coop or something. She's sleeping off to the side, wakes up, and the entire town is in flames. The actual opener is something of a prologue in which Caro is trying to devise a way to drink Jules's blood, because something about her blood is non-consumable. She's also, in a way, trying to figure out how to destroy Jules. And there is this vial that she obtains, and then when the town, when Crofton is aflame, Jules stumbles across this vial. I really must have missed it. I do not know how Caro found Jules, but she does, and she sets this place on fire. The one or two people that Jules encounters are like, "You're a witch, this is all your fault," and I guess we're just supposed to be starting off with the guilt for Jules, but I don't know. The only thing that this scene served a purpose for me for was that Jules was then captured and taken to Shorehaven, which is the palace, because her twin sister / the queen's adopted daughter is being inaugurated. But how did they know she was there? Except that they assumed that she would try to come and rescue Amma, so all they needed to do was lie in wait by Amma's house? Whatever. She's captured. When she encounters Caro, she is unable to manipulate time. Apparently, Caro was able to ingest some of her blood, which, again, I thought that would have been so cool if we had figured out what she did, what her plan is. She's like... Sorry, I know I compare everything to Harry Potter, but that's why this is my channel. I can talk about what I want. But in both the Chamber of Secrets and the Goblet of Fire, we have an unknown antagonist, an unknown villain. We don't know really, we know there's a danger, but we don't know what the danger is. And in many ways, that's what's happening here. We know that Caro is coming for Jules. We just don't know how, when, or why. But it would have been nice to have gotten a little bit more of Caro, but whatever. Even though she cannot manipulate time to escape, Jules is able to stab Caro in the side. For a brief instant, Caro kind of does a regression, because Caro's like 500 plus years old, but she sort of does an age regression, and this throws Jules off. This also sends Jules to another time and place, kind of like a memory. It's a very hazy memory. Don't ask me to explain it to you. It doesn't make much sense. But when she comes to, Caro is back to normal, and she's like, "See ya!" So she runs into the palace. She's trying to find Ina, because she also wants to convince Ina of her innocence, because one of the people that... So not only did she kill the queen, who Ina's adopted mother, but she killed this guy named Roan, who was Ina's betrothed. So she wants to go and convince, because Ina doesn't even know they're sisters. So she's just like, I need Ina to know I didn't do any of this. When she finds Ina's very angry, very bitter. And Jules realizes, what's the point? Because Caro's ultimate goal is to destroy Jules by breaking her heart, because in the lore of the Sorceress and the Alchemist consumed the Sorceress's heart, and now she wants it back. And the reason that Roan was murdered was because Caro thought this would break Jules's heart. So she's like, I need to protect anybody I still have left. So yeah, I'm just gonna take ownership of it. She's thrown into the dungeon, and then Liam, who is Rowan's older brother and something of an arch nemesis for Jules, comes and breaks her out. The plan is to get her onto his friend Elias's boat, and then Elias is going to get her out of the country. But it is the coronation, so they have to disguise Jules, get through the coronation, and they kind of have to maneuver through the throne room, I guess it is. And they're almost to the end when it's realized that Jules is missing. Everything comes to a screeching halt, and I'm like, how did it take so long? Except she did manipulate time, so she may have actually stopped time and nobody knew she was gone just because nothing was happening. In order to throw suspicion off Liam, she pretends to stab him. However, she knew that he had this journal in his breast pocket and that it actually wasn't going to harm him. She stabs him, and then she jumps off the balcony. And I'm a little confused here, and it didn't clear up much when I went back to make my notes, but I was under the impression that she dropped onto rocks and that she hurt herself. Apparently she didn't actually hurt herself, but she gets into the ocean. She's drowning. I guess she slows time because apparently she was in the water for like 7 to 9 minutes, something like that. And then Elias pulls her out of the water. Liam is on the boat and they get out of there. Liam's initial plan is just to get her out of Sempera, because Sempera is the only place that actually has blood iron, which I found very interesting. I thought that would have been a really nice world building moment to expand on why Sempera, and I think actually where Elias is from, used to be ruled by magic and they were able to break free. But I thought it was a great opportunity for them to expand on the island that is Sempera, and apparently nobody ever wants to come to Sempera because they're afraid of what could happen to them there. But she says, I can't leave Sempera. There's no way I can defeat Caro if I'm not here. He says, sure, fine. This is when she devises this plan to retrieve her memory by visiting places she's been before. The first place they go is this place called Bellwood, which is also where Liam had gone to school. So he knows people, he knows his way around, and he takes her to this place called the Thieves' Fort, which is the Alchemist's ancestral home. However, they get to the Thieves' Fort, or the Thief's Fort, and it is in ruins, which it should be because it's hundreds of years old, but it's actually under some kind of enchantment because he takes her through this archway and they are suddenly in a pristine day and time in the alchemist's home. And he reveals to her that as long as you have something of the alchemist's, when you go through that archway, you will be taken back in time. I thought this was another really great moment where she could have gone back and explored who she was, gone through some books, read some stuff, walked through this house and reacquainted herself, seen what kind of memories could be jogged. But she doesn't. Liam does show her some of her writings though. And he's like, we're trying to decipher all this. We can't really read it all because the language is so old. But here are some things that we have figured out. One, there's a pattern of poison and death in these writings that concerns at least 7 of your past lives. It tells about Fox's death, and Fox and Snake are representative of the Sorceress and the Alchemist, and there's a weapon against evil. This is when Jules is thrown back into another memory. She and a bunch of her acolytes are at the Thief's Fort and they are running around trying to get things together because Caro is on her way. So while her acolytes are gathering stuff, she's over here inscribing something in the wall about water, lead, a ruby, evil, weapon, and a claw. Very vague, but that's what she's doing. Caro shows up, and I'm like, what about all the people around you? I thought it was just so discombobulated. Caro shows up and strangles her, but Jules is also holding a dagger. It was hard for me to really make sense of, but that's what's in my notes, so that's what's in my notes. Time passes, and then she goes out and she stumbles across this girl who's a hedge witch. And what she wants from this girl, because in the last book she had done a blood regression, but it was not a real blood regression, and so she wants this girl to do a true blood regression on her. There's a bunch of pointless images, and then Liam shows up, he finds them, and he's really upset. But what Steph, the hedge witch, decides to do, she's like, you know, let's do something alternative. So she pricks Jules's finger, and the blood forms the word, "Seek the River of Red." This compels Jules and Liam to travel to this place where it's thought that the alchemist killed the sorceress. While they're on their way, Jules starts to think about the dagger, and she's wondering if maybe she'd hid it from herself. This dagger is a very important symbol. It is something that we know is representative of the downfall of the sorceress, but she's like, why would I hide it? Maybe I hid it from myself. When they get to the river, Jules does experience another memory. Caro is on the bank. They're obviously much further back in time because this Glen is much younger. There's a bunch of images that I don't understand. Jules is feeling a lot of guilt, and she feels this pain in her thigh, and it turns out the dagger is there and it is pricking her in the thigh. She's trying to clean the blood, and Caro is trying to figure out what happened. I'm really confused about all of this because I don't know when and where it's supposed to represent in the grand scheme of the timeline, but this is what we are seeing. I think it's supposed to represent when because in the story, the alchemist and the sorceress have killed this really terrible guy, this really terrible lord. So I'm assuming this is supposed to be right after she's killed the lord and right before she takes the sorceress's heart. But I can't figure out still where in the timeline it's supposed to land. And what I also don't understand is that, because Caro is telling Jules / the alchemist that she needs to come home or else Lord Ever is going to be upset, which again, this doesn't make sense because if Lord Ever is the guy that they killed, why would it matter, and wouldn't Caro already know this? But then Jules lets Caro examine this blade, and Caro is telling Jules / the alchemist not to be afraid of her power. Yeah. Back in the present, she tells Liam about this vision, and that's when he sort of puts the pieces together for her, and he's like, yeah, that's my ancestor. And Jules is like, how could I have not put that together? Once they return to Bellwood, they learn there's a mercenary there who is hunting Jules. Elias also tells Liam that the headmaster of Bellwood is having a dinner for this mercenary and soldiers, and he wants Liam to be there. While Liam goes and does that, Jules and Elias drink and talk, and then Steph invites them to this underground party. But before they go, Jules makes Elias promise that he will kill her before Caro can. So if there's any sort of moment where she's going to be captured and taken to Caro, he needs to kill her first. So the two of them go to this underground party. I think it's kind of pointless until Steph finishes all of her parlor tricks. She and Jules have a private conversation, and Steph tells her that she had an aunt who recently died. It doesn't make sense why she died, but she has since died. But then there's this cousin who is still around, and her cousin's name is Job or Joab. She's like, he might know something because my aunt was a really powerful hedge witch. So if you're looking for information about this dagger, even though he has no power himself, he knows about artifacts, so he might know something. So that he knows I sent you, I'm gonna give you this token. And the token is a polished rock with an engraving of a face on it, and that represents that evil doesn't always wear the face you expect. Wouldn't you know it, Liam shows up and he's none too happy because he's like, you need to lie low. You are on the lam. Those two have an argument because he doesn't think her going to Joab is a good idea. She goes anyways. When she finds Joab, he's a hot mess. It's not a very productive conversation, but at some point he starts to attack her. She ends up killing him, although he does tell her that it was the sorceress, essentially. The sorceress killed his mother, and the sorceress knew that Jules would eventually find him. So it's not stated verbatim, but it's basically like, hey, I want you to deliver Jules to me. She ends up killing him by fast forwarding him through time until he dies, which I thought another missed opportunity was her exploring her powers, because you get the sense that she was very powerful and she had a much wider skill set than just manipulating time. So I thought maybe this book could have also served as an opportunity for her to explore her powers and to learn about her powers and to really develop her powers for the ultimate showdown. I don't know how she knows what to do. I don't know if it's just an innate sense, but she kind of feels her way around things and hopes for the best most of the time. And that was unsatisfying for me. I want to root for her. I want to know she has a fighting chance. I don't want her to just, throw her stick in the river and hope it comes out the other side. She then runs back to Liam. They share this passionate kiss, and she's like, hold on, we gotta put the brakes on. And then there is a message delivered saying that Liam's father is demanding that he return to Everless. Jules lies to him and tells him, all right, I'll leave the country with Elias, but her plan is obviously not to leave the country. Instead, what she wants to do, she's still focused on this river of red. She thinks that maybe instead of it being where the alchemist killed the sorceress, that perhaps it is just referring to the alchemist's blood or death in general. And that means that they need to go to the Valley of Blythe, because that is the place rumored to be where Caro / the sorceress fed Jules / the alchemist the 12 stones that represented her heart. Once they get there, which, can I tell you, I feel like they traveled really fast in this book. Considering they were going everywhere either on foot or horseback, I expected their journeys to be longer. Although I gotta say, I was watching this TikTok and it was about lowering word counts, particularly in fantasy. And the person talking was giving an example of how writers are like, well, I don't want to be like everybody else, because why do these journeys only take 2 days when they probably take 4 weeks? And so I'm going to do a 4-week journey versus a 2-day journey. And she's like, just give them the 2-day journey. We don't need all this stuff that's going to go into a 4-week journey. Speed it up and make it a 2-day journey. So perhaps that's what's just happening here. But at a certain point, I did sit back and I'm like, wow, it feels like they're going all over this country, but it's only taking them half a day to get there. And then they're back where they need to be by the end of the night. But Jules enters another memory. In this memory, she does possess a bag that contains the 12 stones that represent Caro's heart, which I thought this was also something that we could have delved into, because slight spoiler here, she does not take Caro's heart and turn it into stones. She does something else with this heart. And then this just is layering on top of her abilities and like what she used to be able to do when she was the actual alchemist versus just being Jules and knowing she can manipulate time. Because how did she turn these stones into what would be representative of Caro's heart? And this is all just me. Why would she only do 12 stones? Like, there's so much behind this lore that I wish had been explained in this novel. But whatever the case, she's got the stones. She wants to give them to Caro. Caro doesn't believe her, so she does feed these stones to the alchemist, which does kill her. However, as she is doing this, she accuses Jules of taking everything from her, but Jules is just claiming that she was trying to save her. I believe the dagger is also present in this memory, and my question is, or was, why is this dagger everywhere? I understand on the most basic level that this dagger is the solution and it is the motif, but I was sick and tired of this dagger that we knew nothing about, this unobtainable weapon. I wanted some more breadcrumbs about it versus just the imagery and the knowledge that we'd have to find it. As soon as Jules comes out of that vision, she falls into another vision, and this is the one that depicts her meeting Caro for the first time. It seems that Jules was an outcast in her town because she has these abilities, and Caro has come across her, and then Caro and her dad also are extremely powerful. And so when I was done with all of this, I sat back and I realized, where did Jules come from? We never get an explanation about that. We know that she's an outcast, that people think she's weird. They don't want anything to do with her. But I wanted to know where she came from. And then to a larger extent, why are they the only three that seem to have any kind of power? Some kind of magical ability? This is some of that world building that I think would have helped, because it just seems a little too convenient that the only three people in this entire realm who have magical power are gonna find each other. I mean, is it something that has just been bred out of people and they were the last of their kind? Was Jules rejected by her family and she had come all this way from somewhere further off? I would have liked to have gotten backstory on this, but as I said, she's sitting by this river carving a snake into a rock, because that's what the village calls her, is a snake, when this young girl comes across her. And the young girl's like, oh, hey, well, my dad calls me a fox. He says you can come live with us because you're special like we are. And I'm like, but how? What does he know of Jules? Does he know anything about her, or did they spot her across the river? So Jules goes to live, and obviously this is Caro. They become best friends. So Jules exits. So back in real time once more, Jules finds that Elias has been captured by the soldiers. She's trying to rescue him, but encounters the huntsman. Elias, seeing that she's in danger, tries to make good on his promise to kill her, and he throws his dagger at her. He does hit her, but then she rewinds time so that it doesn't actually happen. He gets attacked by a soldier and is stabbed in the side. She's like, hey, maybe I can manipulate time by speeding it up to heal this wound faster. And I think she's also holding off the soldiers. I don't know what's happening. Whatever the case, girl does not know what she's doing. She can't manipulate time the way she wants. And so she's unable, not necessarily to save him. I don't know his fate. I think he does survive, but she's unable to heal him the way that she's intending to heal him. What she does then is she runs away, and she finds herself in the Girling's graveyard. Which again, how is everything so close together? Because this means that she's close to Everless. I was spatially confused, I guess we could say, throughout this novel. It was all just a little too convenient, less plotted and planned out than the first book. While she's in this graveyard, she discovers Roan's grave, and then she walks a little further and she discovers Lord Ever's grave as well. But wouldn't you know it, the huntsman finds her. And I'm like, how did the huntsman find her? If she had frozen time, did the huntsman just guess where she was gonna be? Whatever it is, they tussle, and the huntsman, spoiler, is revealed to be Ina. I have a slight issue with this because we do know that Ina is kind of wily. How she's wily, I don't know, because Ina was adopted by the queen when she was a baby. In the first book, we learned that her mission was to figure out where she came from. And so I guess this is how and when and why she learned how to be manipulative and deceitful and like be able to break away to pursue this knowledge without anybody knowing. But how she developed such a strong skill set as to be this huntsman, I don't know. Jules is able to finally convince Ina of her innocence, and she does it by sharing memories, which, when did that become a power of hers? I don't know. At this time, she also reveals that they are sisters. Ina gives her the huntsman getup so that she can go to Everless and do whatever she needs to do. One thing I forgot to mention, the stone that Steph had given her had gotten, I forget exactly what happens. I think it got wet at the graveyard, and this smoke rises up, reveals the face of Lord Ever. What was the whole point about this stone? And what was the whole point about this stone getting wet and turning into smoke when we knew Lord Ever was the face of evil? This was not shocking. I feel like whatever came from this stone should have been something that nobody could have predicted or that we actually needed. We didn't need to see this little moment with the stone going up in smoke and revealing Lord Ever's face. So she goes back to Everless, and her goal is to find the dagger. Some things are just a little bit more important, and that would include Jules finding Liam and sleeping with him. A lot of people had an issue with this. If anything, I liked their romance. I liked the tension of kind of enemies to lovers, and then is anything ever going to come of it? But frankly, there was a lack of development with their relationship, especially to get them to this point. They weren't together enough in Evermore, because you could see it in Everless. You could see, even though Caro thought that Roan was the one who would break Jules' heart, you could see that she was realizing Roan wasn't worth her time. She had misjudged Liam and that she was developing feelings for him. So we knew this was going to happen, and I was actually okay if and when something did happen in Evermore. But we got nothing between them almost this entire book. So I had an issue with this. I didn't see a need for it, but they sleep together. She wakes up and puts him under a spell. I guess she kind of freezes time around him. And then she goes off to continue her search. She's searching the castle until ultimately she gets to the vault, which would make sense because that's kind of where a lot of things have started. And she can hear Caro in the distance. She knows that Caro is coming for her and she's got to hurry as she's feeling along this massive door. The thing about this door is that it can suck the life from you, and they coat it in purple stuff so that you are obviously somebody who tried to break into their vault. Maybe because there was nothing left in their vault because Liam's dad had emptied their coffers for one reason or another, but she's feeling along this door. It seems to have no effect whatsoever. Nothing, no time is being sucked from her. And she figures out there's this channel running through the middle of it, and it kind of looks like dark, like blood. And there's a nail there. So she's like, maybe this is the River of Red. So she pricks herself, the door opens, and I'm like, I mean, I must have missed it. But whatever the case, This has to be how the girlings would open their own vault, because the doors swing open. She goes inside and she's like, yeah, wow, there really are moths flying out of here. There's nothing left of the girling fortune. When she'd had that flashback to Caro discovering her and her being invited to go live with Caro and her father, Caro had pulled out a money sack which had the symbol of a flowering tree on it. So as Jules is feeling around in the vault, she notices a symbol of that tree and she pushes it, and this reveals a hatch in the ceiling. She ascends through this tunnel, and I am confused as to where she ends up, because Caro's dad, Lord Ever, built Everless. This is where he did all of his mad scientist stuff, and he came up with blood iron. So she goes through, and it's like this hidden room, and in the room are two beds, this really creepy mural of Fox and Snake being watched over by this fierce dog creature, and a table full of medieval time bending tools. I don't know if this is a room where she and Caro were supposed to be sleeping, because eventually we get another memory in which, even though they invited Jules, in the memory it's now saying that Jules begged to live with them and that he was building this great manor, but there was no room for her. So I don't really know what this room is supposed to represent, because Caro is like, well, I want you to sleep with me anyway. So they shared a room, so I don't know if this is supposed to be their room. I don't know if this is his secret laboratory and he had a bed in there for each. I don't really know what this room is supposed to be in the grand scheme of things. But it's supposed to be a hidden room that hides things. She's in there, and Caro finds her. And I guess Caro found her because Caro, knowing things started in the vault, knows, let's go to the vault, and oh hey, I'm assuming the hatch was still open, so she goes up this hatch. She finds Jules, and they have their ultimate showdown. But as Jules had been going around the room, she was feeling along the beds, and underneath the pillow of one of the beds was her dagger, was this ruby dagger that had been in all of her visions. And that's when I am flabbergasted. This must have been their room. Otherwise, why would the dagger be there? How the dagger got there in the first place, I don't know. That was actually one of the questions that I wrote down after I finished all of this. But Jules has this dagger. She and Caro are having their showdown, and she ends up stabbing Caro. Smoke billows up and out, baiting both of them in memories. It's basically showing Caro's evolution from innocent best friend playmate to power-hungry, bloodthirsty. It's showing how Lord Ever developed this idea of blood iron and like bled everyone dry, and Caro was there every step of the way helping him and enjoying this while Jules watched from the side. Jules, in desperation, goes to a local hedge witch and is like, how do I kill this guy? The hedge witch says that you can only kill pure evil with pure love. So sometime later, Jules wakes up in the middle of the night, puts Caro under a spell, carves out her heart, and again, using this immense power she does not display in current time, creates this dagger and infuses it with Caro's heart. Sorry, I lied. She absorbs Caro's heart and then creates this dagger out of her love for Caro. The downside of all of this is that she drains both of them of their memories of each other, which explains why Caro hates her so much. They know they had been friends, but the love for each other they'd had as friends is no longer present. So I thought that was pretty neat. Like, I loved this idea because it's a sacrifice. I really enjoyed this idea that Jules had to lose everything in order to gain what she needed to gain. Now that she has the dagger, she goes and she cuts Lord Ever's throat, which I would like to know how old she is at this point, because I want to know how she was able to overpower him. But this is when I don't understand the scene at the river, because I'm guessing this is when she goes to clean the dagger, but she can't go to clean the dagger yet, because as she is leaving from cutting Lord Ever's throat, Caro finds her, and Caro is like, what did you do to me? And she knows that Jules has killed her father. So this is how I don't understand how all of these memories are coming together as true puzzle pieces. It's almost like they're false memories, that it's supposed to give you the idea of what happened, but these aren't actually events that occurred. Caro tries to attack her with magic or power, whatever you want to call it, but she has none left. So this is when I ask myself, did Jules drain Caro of her power permanently? Was it a temporary thing? She was able to kind of re-energize and restock her power? How does this dagger kill Lord Ever? I don't understand why she didn't just go ahead and also kill Caro, because we saw where Caro was headed. And again, we missed so much development about Caro. How did she go from being Jules' best friend to being equally power hungry and bloodthirsty as her father? But before I go into all those questions, Caro tries to come for Jules, and Jules runs away. From here is where we get the lore of the Alchemist and the Sorceress and all that kind of stuff. We no longer need any more of this memory. But back to my questions regarding this dagger and Jules' expectations. What did she expect to happen once she killed Lord Ever? Did she really think that Caro was going to be okay with this? How did she think Caro was going to react to learning that Jules took her heart? And I personally would have liked a little bit more about the realization, that moment when Caro realized that Jules had taken her heart. I also, because this is supposed to be a fantasy novel, so I can suspend my belief with certain things, but it's also steeped pretty deeply in reality. And because we don't really know the extent of Jules' power, I don't know how Caro is supposed to literally survive without her heart. Jules didn't replace it with anything, but she took Caro's physical heart. It wasn't the idea of Caro's heart. She took Caro's physical heart out of her body. But because we don't understand the extent of Jules' power, there's no way for us to understand how Caro was able to survive this. How did the dagger get under the pillow? Did Caro put the dagger under the pillow at some point? Did it magically appear there? Did Jules put the dagger under the pillow? But if Jules ran away, how did she get back to put the dagger under the pillow? I was expecting from all these memories, somehow, at some point, she was going to come up with this dagger she keeps imagining being in her hand. At some point, she's going to come out of a vision and actually possess this dagger. Personally, I also thought it was too simplistic. She finds a hidden room, she feels under a pillow and finds a dagger. She stabs Caro. And honestly, guys, this is basically the end of the book. There's a couple other things, but there was no great showdown so Caro does essentially drink in some of her heart. So we do get this idea that there's forgiveness and there's understanding, but we don't have this big moment of revelation where the girls are reunited. If Caro knows so much, because it seems that Jules lost all of her memories when this happened, or something about her death that first time, and whenever she would be reborn with a stone in her mouth, she no longer had memories. So I don't know if it's because there have been 12 incarnations of her and just over time she's lost them, or if she lost them by that first incarnation. But Caro seems to know everything. So why didn't Caro take the dagger? So many unanswered questions. And again, okay, so if we're gonna go back to this idea that Jules loses her memories with her first death, I mean, what did it look like for her first reincarnation to encounter Caro? How did Caro realize that she was being reincarnated and she would have a stone in her mouth? This is what I'm saying, where we lacked a lot of development and backstory to answer these questions. This plot was so simplistic and so underwhelming. All of these memories, again, I would have been totally fine with this book being, she goes from place to place to place and she's essentially reacquainting herself with herself. She's learning about herself. And by learning about herself, she's learning about Caro. And by learning about Caro, she understands how to defeat Caro. I thought that would have been a better plot line. This was disjointed, in my opinion, what we got. This one could have had a simple explanation, but Liam says Lord Ever is his ancestor. So does that mean they are directly descended from Lord Ever? Because when we get that final flashback, when that smoke engulfs the room and Jules is thrown back in time, you get the sense like he literally kills this entire town. He drains this entire town of blood. There is nothing indicating there's any family whatsoever, because it's just him and his daughter and then this little offshoot up on this hill in this great house. So if he dies, does that mean that the Girlings are descendant from Caro? So how is this their ancestry? The emphasis for both books is Caro wants to break Jules's heart. And I think we can all guess the only way to break Jules's heart is for Caro to die. Which I love, because there's some other book I read where the answer was about true love, and I mean, maybe I'm thinking about Once Upon a Time, but in the end, it wasn't about a man loving her. It was about her loving herself, or maybe it was like the love of her best friend or the love of her family, but it wasn't a romantic love that this person needed. So I love that this whole book, this whole series, even though we had this huge emphasis on the romance with Roan or Liam, it's about the friendship. And the whole problem started because one girl saw the path that her best friend was going down and said, I can't let her go there, I have to save her. So I loved that this boiled down to a friendship. Do I understand and think all that led up to it made sense? No. It was a nice twist to get away from the romance that so much young adult tends to include. Throughout all of this, I didn't feel like Jules was all that smart. I thought she was kind of thick, actually. Not that she was dumb. She was an intelligent person, but I think she was a very smart person. And I wanted to see her, because she's my heroine, I wanted to see her putting the pieces together. And it just felt like she was in the dark so much of the time, largely because she has no memories. And she's taking this whole book to learn how to get to the end. When you're writing a book, that all should kind of finish by the midpoint. So she should be reactive, and at the midpoint, she needs to take action. So I think that she should have gone through all these learning moments up until that midpoint, and then she's like, oh, these are my memories. Or maybe the memories she gets from there, she's like, oh, this is how I can apply what I'm learning. These are the final pieces to my puzzle in order to achieve success. Somehow also the blood irons were tied to Caro, and with Caro's death, blood irons were no longer a thing. You could no longer make blood iron, which I thought was interesting. I still don't understand how that works. There's just so much development world building that we missed here. I get it. It's not something that I think shouldn't have happened because her father caused the issue. But why was it her and her dad? If this is a time-honored tradition, if this is a honed skill, why was it tied back to her and her dad? At the beginning of the book, when we're talking to and about Elias, and he's saying, oh yeah, well, my country was able to break itself free from magic, couldn't they have broken themselves free from magic rather than magic breaking itself free from them? It seems like everything was tied back to Caro somehow, and I don't know what were the invisible bonds between her and the blood irons, except that her dad created the idea of blood irons. I would think that once you put the formula out there, it's gonna be out there. But as I said, we don't have enough of that to know how any of this can work. The final thought that Jules has is, with Caro re-consuming her heart's essence, in a sense, like when Jules stabbed her, this dagger melted. That's what this smoke was from. This dagger, it became no more and it filled the room. Actually, I think that's not true. The dagger, it does disappear. But Caro had wounded Jules. She had created some kind of superficial wound, and this, I guess, along with Caro's death, this broke Jules's heart, and it allowed it to pour out, and Caro could consume it. So now Jules is wondering, and this is what I'm gathering. I think this is where Holland was going with it. Jules is wondering, does that mean that perhaps Caro can come back to her, maybe in a reincarnated form, the way she had continued to reincarnate? Please correct me if I'm wrong, but that seems to be the hopeful note that we are ending on here. As we end on that note, I think we're just gonna end, period. This book, it was a lot of the complaints, and I agree, it was very slow, and it was pretty boring, just because there was no momentum. And then the end was pretty exciting, but it felt very rushed. So if I were to say read a book, read Everless, and then come up with your own ending for them, okay? So have a great day. Thanks for joining me. I'll see you next time.